Hi, everyone. I'm Melody Palmer-Izzola. While we're waiting for everyone to join us, why don't we do an icebreaker? If you could have one superpower, what would you choose? We got flight, invisibility, a super strength, healing, and telepathy. What would you all choose? Felicia, why don't we start with you? What would you choose?
Probably healing.
Okay. And we got the poll that comes up, so I can't vote, but if you're joining us, please vote what superpower you would have. You know, healing's a good one. They added that one. It was not on the last forum I did, and I really like that one. How about anybody else? What would y'all choose?
I feel like I want to be greedy and have two. I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful to heal and also be able to have flight to get where I need to be able to heal? So if I could do two things, I'd be greedy about it.
Nice, nice. I just saw that somebody put in the chat shape shifting. That would be interesting. Yes. And just so y'all know, the interpretation has not started yet. So I just got a message that it'll start shortly once we start the.
May I give instructions for people?
Please do.
Yes, thank you very much. So good morning, everyone. This is a multilingual event. We have a Spanish English interpretation available. So please, if you look at the bottom of your screen, if you're in your computer, you're going to see a globe that says interpretation. If you click on it, you will be able to select your language of preference, English or Spanish. If you're joining us from a phone or from a tablet, you need to go look for the three dots that say more. If you click on more, you will be able to find the language interpretation option. You click on it and make your language selection, and you need to make sure you click done, so the interpretation can start. And now I'm going to give these instructions in Spanish.
Thank you.
Buenos días a todos. Este es un evento multilingüe. Tenemos interpretación al inglés y al español disponible. Si ustedes desean usar la interpretación, les voy a pedir que por favor los que estén acompañándonos desde sus computadoras, en la parte de abajo de la pantalla de Zoom, van a ver un globo que dice interpretación. Si hacen clic en ese globo, van a ver la opción de dos idiomas, inglés y español. Por favor, elijan su idioma de preferencia. ¿Sí? Si desean participar en español para que puedan escucharlo todo en ese idioma, elijan español. Si nos acompañan desde sus tabletas o desde sus celulares, hay que buscar los tres puntitos que dicen más o more. Ahí van a encontrar la opción de interpretación de idiomas. Pueden hacer su elección del idioma en el que quieren participar. Y por favor, no olviden hacer clic en listo o done para que puedan empezar a escuchar la interpretación. Por favor, si tienen cualquier problema, nos mandan un mensajito por el chat para poderlos ayudar. Please, everyone, if you have any issues with the interpretation, let us know in the chat and we'll be able to help you. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias. Lady Jane, can I please be made interpreter now? Thank you so much.
Sure.
Gracias. Thank you so much. We're going to start the program, but just to let you know that the highest one was 50% healing for all, you know, those kind of people, and then flight was the second most highest one. So it's noon. Let's get started. So good afternoon. Oh, and I'm going to speak a little slower. I tend to speak fast, but because we have the interpreter, I'm going to try to speak slower. So please remind me if I start speaking too fast. My name is Melody Palmer-Izzola. I'm the practice administrator at Child and Family Services at Integral Care. Thank you for joining us for today's community forum, Supporting Kids' Mental Health During Back to School. This forum is co-presented with Austin Public Health. Just so you know, we are recording today's forum and it will be streaming on Facebook. Integral Care is a designated local authority for mental health and intellectual and developmental disability for Travis County. For over 50 years, we have supported adults and children.
Durante más de 50 años hemos apoyado a adultos y niños.
Are we good? Okay.
I think the interpretation got turned off. So can we turn it back on? And And then everybody select language again. Se deshabilitó la interpretación.
Good.
Por favor, cuando vuelva a aparecer el globito, ¿pueden por favor elegir su idioma otra vez?
Lady, are you on here? Because I also see that it no longer has like the language option on the bottom of the screen.
All right, give me a moment. So I need to know who is in there. Is Susanna already in there and Azucena is not?
But we're both out.
Okay.
We're both out. I guess interpretation got finished, but can you please add us both this time?
All right.
I'm
It
still
should
out.
be- You are still out.
Yes. If you make me host, maybe I
Sus-
can do that.
Sure. Susanna is in now.
Yes, I
All
think
right.
so. Yeah.
So thank you for bearing with us. Again, if you'll click on your language at the bottom of the screen, if you're English, speak it, click English, Spanish, click Spanish. Okay. Okay. So for 50 years, Integral Care has supported adults and children living with mental illness, substance use disorder, and intellectual and/or developmental disabilities. In recent years, we've seen significant increases in depression, anxiety, and youth thinking about suicide. And heading back to school is always a difficult time for a lot of kids, and young students may face more challenges to their mental well-being. So now is an important time to be aware of those challenges and how to offer support. I'm honored to welcome today's panelists who will discuss how to spot mental health issues, tips for talking to kids about mental health. We'll talk about suicide prevention, and they'll also give us some more mental health resources that are available in our community. So on the screen, we have Michelle Pearson. She's a licensed clinical social worker supervisor. She is a program manager at Integral Care's Del Valle school-based program. She has over 16 years of experience working with youth and their families, and she enjoys supporting her team of school-based therapists in working with clients and families in their journeys toward healing. I also have Joellen Goldsberry. She's a licensed professional counselor supervisor. She serves as our mental health liaison between Integral Care and Region 13 Education Service Center. She is entering her 17th year in the field of education and mental health. Her primary role is to connect school districts with mental health trainings and their LMHAs to better support students, staff, and families. We also have Felicia McBride Rivers. She's a parent and community member with lived experience. A single mother, Felicia is currently the full-time caregiver of 2 family members with dual diagnosis of mental illness and substance misuse disorders. We'll start with a panel discussion and then take audience questions for the last 10 to 15 minutes. If you have questions, please type them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll try to get to as many as we can. And if we run out of time, you please include your email so we can follow up with you. So welcome, everyone. Great to have you all here. Lots of good experience on the panel. So let's just jump right in. Felicia, you have lived experience caring for your daughter who has struggled with substance use and suicidal ideation. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what your journey's been like?
Yeah, sure. So my daughter, when she was a teenager, 13, 14, really starting into those adolescent years, she just started having a hard time just being able to connect with her classmates. There started to be some socioeconomic differences based on the school she was in, and she was starting to feel that. And then we also had, unfortunately, we had about 4 deaths, 2 family members who completed suicide, and then we had 2 classmates. One just died, and the other one actually completed suicide. And so this was kind of like happening back to back, along with everything she was going through hormonally, in her adolescent years. And at that point, let's just say, I say the adolescent years is difficult for children to verbalize what they're going through because they don't really know how to put it into words. And
Mhm.
so, and then as a parent, when you have a child who goes from being an A+ student, everyone, wants her around or wants them around. They're having play dates, they're being invited in to everything, then to where they start becoming an introvert, so to speak.
Mhm.
Then as a parent, you don't really know what to do because it almost seems like it's overnight when that happens. It's like one day you have your little child, your son or your daughter who's in your eyes perfect, right? And then the next thing you know, there's all these problems, and it starts with school, not performing well in school. And so ultimately, what I learned to do was I learned to ask my daughter, okay, you want me to just listen, or do you want me to give you advice? That was a big thing. Um, and I know that sometimes some of us as parents, I mean, especially culturally speaking, you're the child, I'm the parent. Um, but I honestly had to reframe my thinking and to a certain degree, put my daughter on an equal platform with me as far so we could have a dialogue, right?
Mhm.
That's
Important,
that's
yeah.
what we want to get to, right? So I'm like, yes, I'm your mother, but I'm here. I'm here to listen and to help wherever I can. And and that really actually kind of opened her up. It was a little slow, but it opened her up faster than I expected. So I knew that worked. So with that being said,
Yeah.
that's kind of like how it went. To start with. Of course, there's a lot more detail, a lot more additional things that have happened, but
But I
I'm
like that
open to
because
questions.
yeah, I like that because you're, we've talked about as a group, like, a lot of times parents and caregivers, don't know whether teens are just going through their normal teenage angst, or is it something more serious? A lot of times parents be like, oh, they'll just get over it once they, get out of being a teenager, right? So what signs and symptoms should parents watch for, or, that could indicate that their child is struggling more with their mental health and it's just not a normal kind of teenage angst? Um, who would like to start with that? Michelle or Joelle? Michelle?
Sure, sure. Well, good afternoon again, everybody. It's so nice to be in this wonderful group of wisdom. I feel like, one thing that's important to say is there's not a one size fits all. I think, parents and caregivers certainly know their kiddos the best, and knowing some of their changes and signs, like you were saying, Felicia, it's not uncommon for us to see changes with their eating habits or their sleeping habits, and maybe increase in their isolation, like you mentioned, Felicia. Maybe socially they've had some changes. And I think that's tricky because that is something that often comes with changes in their development and adolescence, in their teenage years. That can be sort of a normal part of it. But I think, when you see big changes, increased isolation, maybe even reports of feeling like they don't have any friends, that they feel increased worries, or even feeling as though, having negative thoughts about themselves, whether I'm bad or nobody cares about me. It's not uncommon for kiddos this age to really kind of increase their negative self-talk. And so that would be something we would look for in terms of their changes. And like you mentioned, Felicia, trouble in school too. Maybe they were an A student or even a solid B student, and we're seeing that they're having more difficulty in school. And I think sometimes even going to their community, whether it's speaking to their teachers or people around them, to see if they're also noticing changes in your child would be important as well.
I think those are all, great signs kind of be on the lookout for, I just want to add too, like sometimes when I've seen teens especially, they'll just be like, I'm just tired. I'm just done. And then you're like, what does that mean? So, as a parent, kind of sometimes we can miss the signs that our kids really struggling. So what are maybe some proactive steps that parents can take to especially kind of prevent, suicide in their teens? Any suggestions for that? Felicia, I know you talked about opening up that dialogue with your daughter.
Opening up the dialogue, and then once I allowed her to actually speak, then she was willing to listen to me. So the next thing I followed up with was that, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary situation. You won't always feel this way. And I shared a little bit about me growing up and how I felt like I was never really part of the crowd. But I mean, the thing that helped her a lot is when I said that it's a permanent solution to a temporary situation. And the next thing I followed up with, you owe it to yourself. You owe it to yourself to see what you can be in this life. You're here for a reason, and you might be able to help someone along the way. Right now, as you're getting yourself together, developing yourself, strengthening yourself, you owe it to yourself to know what your future holds.
I like that. I like that. Joellen?
Melody, kind of to piggyback off of what Felicia was saying too, I think when students and kids do come to you and they are saying like, hey, I'm struggling, or you're just noticing and you're trying to initiate that conversation, it's really important for the adult listening to have that poker face, right? We need to not go straight into alarm, kind of like, to borrow an analogy from mental health first aid training, but the duck on the water, they're just gliding across the water. We just see nice, calm, still, right? And we need to be that on the outside when internally and underneath the water, those ducks' little feet are just going crazy to move them from one side to the pond to the other. And with some of our kids and our students, that's all we're trying to do is get them from distress to safety. But they need to see just that calm, steady presence. And inside, we can be the feet going crazy, but outside we have to be that calm, safe place for them.
I love that. That's a great analogy. And I always say, to parents too, it's like, you have to be able to hear whatever your kids have to say, no matter how hard, and that they trust that you, like Felicia was saying, just listen to them. Right. I do want to add, a lot of times, people still think that if you talk about suicide, you will give them the idea. Does anybody want to talk about that?
Sure. No, I think, one thing that came to mind as you were talking, Joellen, is there's still so much stigma around just mental illness in general, and really normalizing this idea that mental well-being is part of our physical well-being, is part of our, physical health, our mental health. And so just this idea of really normalized discussion around, mental well-being as part of our general well-being. And so I think it's an important thing to say out loud to kids that it is not uncommon for kids to have sometimes fleeting thoughts, but some thoughts at least of, wanting to, things being so overwhelming that they'd rather go to sleep and not wake up, that, if these problems weren't there, I would just, it would just be so much better. And would that be if I weren't alive? And so I think sometimes, even planting those seeds around, these are thoughts that, are not uncommon to have. Is this something you've ever thought about, or something that's ever crossed your mind? Just really normalizing that it's not uncommon to have these very heavy and difficult thoughts. And I think it can also be very scary for kids. And when they perceive adults are uncomfortable talking about it, they won't bring it up. And so, really ourselves building some muscle, some strength around our comfort level, discussing these difficult and uncomfortable things.
Yeah, I like that, because it kind of goes with kind of my next point was, when it comes to having these conversations around mental health, parents, a lot of times, they don't know where to start. Like you said, it's scary on both ends. What advice would y'all give to a parent who wants to start a conversation with their child around mental health, even, talking about suicides? We've had a couple deaths, suicide deaths in, Austin. How do you bring that up with your kids? Who would like to start?
I'm happy to start. I think one thing, I know we were talking as a group just in preparation of this, that sometimes I think as parents and adults in their lives, we have this writing response. We want to go right to fix, or we want to go right to, minimizing, oh, it's not that bad. but really getting comfortable, like I think a few of you have said, which is listening and sort of being the calm with them. So these conversations don't necessarily have to happen, where it's very serious and they're on the spot and, it's intense. It can really happen in the car and, in a car ride from one place to another. It can be doing something you enjoy in the kitchen. If you and your kiddo or young person like to cook together, it can be side by side doing something the two of you enjoy. It doesn't have to be scary. It can be in a very comfortable setting, where we're used to doing things together. Or some of my ideas. What do the rest of you guys think? What has worked for your young people?
Felicia?
Well, I'll say for me, I just started out asking my daughter how her day was. And she would start saying, well, she, name names. I'll just do a general name. Well, Emily did this to me today and it really, well, she didn't share exactly how it made her feel. She was just like, and she just kept going on and on. And I said, okay, well, how did that make you feel? And there would open up the door to her actually talking to me about it. And then, she got used to talking to me about just being upset about what happened in her day, right? Then she started sharing when she had the thoughts of suicide. And I want to back up just a little bit. Our children are having that conversation, whether they're bringing that up to us or not. With their peers, they are having this conversation. And that kind of, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself, but that leads me into the substance abuse or misuse disorder, because once my daughter got to the adolescent years, like, I want to say 12, 13, 14, 15, then the door was open to that. And guess what? She did not get that from home. She got that from her peers. She went to a private school where the majority of her peers had older siblings, like we're talking high school and college. And that opened the door to things like alcohol and other, drugs. And I had no idea that that was really going on. She masked it very well. And until we ended up in the Dell Children's Medical Center one night at like 10:30 at night. And they were keeping her there to make sure she metabolized all the alcohol she ingested. And I was like, what? We've been talking. What do you mean? So my point is, they are having a conversation behind your back. So it's good to open up the dialogue as soon as you can.
Yeah, I think, and both to what both of y'all say, I know those cards that, what do they talk, repeat, what list? You got some, Michelle, on your desk there? What are they?
I do ask, listen, talk, repeat. I wanted to bring that up because I'm like, gosh, these cards are actually really good. And Felicia, what you mentioned reminded me of that, just having some conversation openers. And I know in this partnership with Austin Public Health and Integral Care, the ask, listen, talk, repeat campaign, that ask piece, which is start the conversation, just start talking. We don't have to have all the right things, and but just start that dialogue, and then listen to hear without judgment, which I think as a parent and an adult can be really difficult. I know sometimes I have to sit on my own hands and just be there and be present and be listening. And that talk is support their emotion. So validating, like, oh, that must be really hard, or that must be really scary, or that must be really disappointing. And then repeat that it's not a one-time thing, right? It's something that hopefully we're opening that conversation again and again, and becomes something that we become more comfortable ourselves doing with young people.
Yeah. You want to hold up one of the cards just so people.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got one too, Felicia. Oh, you can't see with my camera. There you go.
And flip it around. So on the back, there's like questions, and they're in English and Spanish. And they're just kind of like, almost like we did an icebreaker in the beginning. They're kind of like icebreakers with your kids, just to get them, maybe when you're eating dinner at the table. Yep. Say, let's everybody pick a question, get a card and answer the question, just having that, I think so we're busy in our lives, right? And so being able to sit down and talk with your kids, and I think it's extremely important. Any other comments on that particular, about starting that conversation with your kids?
Melody, I would say that the earlier the better. that you can help to normalize that, hey, in our family, we can talk about anything. The younger, because more and more I echo what Felicia said, that they're talking with their friends about it way before they're ever going to feel okay talking with you as the parent or adult caregiver in their life. So the younger that you can start that culture in your family of it's safe to talk about anything and everything, and you're going to be loved no matter what. Maybe that there's still some consequences because that's how life works, right? But we're going to love you through it and we're going to help you through it. The younger, the better is my only add on to that.
And I love that because it kind of segue into my next topic is, we've heard of children as young as 8 completing suicide, attempting suicide. So what about like parents of kind of young children? Is it appropriate to talk with them about things like suicide? And Joel, I think, talking about mental health, the earlier the better. My kids, God bless them, they get raised by a therapist. So ever since day one, they're like, we are talking about feelings. So
yeah.
So what about other people out there?
Start with that question, Melody, just because that is the stage of parenting that my family is in right now, is the younger side. And again, we just start early where it's okay. We can talk about anything and everything, and we want to be very transparent and vulnerable. Our son last night, in a joking way, made a joke about, he had his little Minecraft sword, and he goes, I'm going to hurt myself. I said, oh, hey, nope, those words are not safe words. And here's why, at a very developmentally appropriate level, right?
Mhm.
So keep it short, keep it sweet, and keep it on repeat, to where these are the words that we do want to say. We want to be kind. We want to be uplifting. We want to cheer people on, right? And we want to be helpful. We don't want to be hurtful to anybody, including ourselves. We talk a lot, to borrow from TBRI, trust-based relational intervention.
Yes.
We talk about inside hurts and outside hurts that we can see. And sometimes our inside hurts are worse than our outside hurts at times. So just find the language that really fits for you and the students or the children that you get to be involved with, and early and often.
I like that.
Those
Early and often. Okay. Anybody else add to that? Yeah, I
Totally
think the
agree.
more you can, and I think even, talking with the little ones, maybe not, I always say not use the word suicide because they may not understand what that word means, but, like Felicia said, not only do they have their peers telling them stuff, but these young kids are also on social media. And so they hear about like these, famous people who die by suicide. And so it's just in their face. So, helping them probably to understand what that means is appropriate. And again, talking about suicide, right, does not put it in someone's head, that idea in their head. If they're thinking about it, it's already been there. You're not gonna, and actually I would say it helps because it gives them, so often people just, kids and adults, hold stuff in and they don't tell anybody. Because they may be afraid they don't want to burden mom and dad, for a lot of reasons. I had one kid in therapy, he's 16 with severe depression. And I said, do I need anything else to know about you? And he's like, I lie. And I said, what do you lie about? He said, I'm a good liar. This is a straight A student. I said, what are you lying about? How I feel. I don't tell my mom how I really feel. When she asks me I'm okay, I'm good. So yeah, so give them that safe space to, talk about their feelings, whether they're little ones, and having them, use I always say, use your words to express your feelings. So, what about, any comments about bullying? I hear a lot about that. Michelle, you're in the schools. How do kids kind of cope with that?
You know, I think one thing that we can probably all agree on that's very different than when we were all coming up was social media, right? And kids, you know, it being a very commonplace thing for them to have, well, their own phone oftentimes or access to some type of social media. It's never a bad idea for parents to learn how to monitor and create healthy structures and healthy boundaries with social media. I think, you know, kids have access to one another and others have access to them in ways that, you know, we never experienced just with phones and social media. And so I think bullying looks very different, you know, because kids are accessible in different ways. And so certainly monitoring and putting some healthy boundaries around the use of phones, electronics, and social media, it seems important. Sorry, that made me think of something else we were talking about too. Oh, one thing that you asked, Melody, is what they're also afraid of. They're also afraid of being in trouble. I mean, really, they're kind of afraid they don't want to necessarily, they don't want us to disapprove of them. They want our acceptance and love. And I think something you said, Joellen, really sticks with me, resonates, is that, you know, that we're going to love them even if we don't necessarily approve of something they're involved in or something that they've done. So they are afraid of losing our approval and our love and being in trouble. And so I think sometimes it's really helpful to say there isn't anything you can't say to me, like you said, Felicia. There isn't anything we can't talk about. There may be some problem solving we need to do, but you know that everything is fair game. Because I also think they observe what adults do in their lives. That we ourselves like to stuff and we'd like to smooth things over and make things sort of appear okay. You know, I think that's what we do as adults as well. And I think kids are very smart and insightful about picking up on how adults handle things. And so they learn very quickly, oh, those are things we don't talk about, or those are things, you know, that we kind of stuff away and put away. And so I think we can also model ourselves talking openly about things that are difficult for us, that we also navigate.
Yeah, those are two very, you know, great points about, you know, kids modeling what their parents do. And then thank you for bringing up like the social media, you know, because I was, you know, if you haven't read the Surgeon General about Dr. Murphy, he released the whole report on social media and children. And we don't know how it affects, you know, the long-term effects that this has on our kids. They're dealing with, you know, I always think, you know, I always say, thank God I didn't have it when I was a kid, because I wouldn't have needed that, you know. It's hard. It's hard for parents also to, you know, set those boundaries with kids on how much screen time they get, and, you know, and then it becomes a battle sometimes with parents. Felicia, you have did you struggle with that with your daughter?
Well, when it came to bullying, fortunately, no. But me, when I was growing up, I was a bully. I'm not proud of that at all. But I will say that the thing about bullies is they usually feel totally inept. Like, in other words, they feel out of place. And most of the time, they don't feel like they have a voice or any power at home. Okay, so
Right.
I'll speak more specifically about that. I felt like my mother favored my brother, and when like that, I didn't matter at home. And so then there was another thing. There was a social aspect to that, where there were people who I thought were very pretty or good looking, and they looked the way I wanted to look, right? At that time, being a teenager, right?
Mhm.
So one person had long flowy hair, one person looked like Brooke Shields. Well, okay, looking at me, you know, I'll never look like Brooke Shields. And so the second part of that is I wanted to look like her. And then she was nice. You know, the bullies usually don't pick on the people who they know will fight back, right? She
Right.
was nice and she was an easy target. So she was pretty, she was sweet, nice, and it's nothing to be proud of at all. Okay, because I just terrorized her, but she was the only one. And I felt out of place in my group at home, at home, as well as my social group at school. So I'm like 12, 13 at this time when this is happening. So,
Mhm.
you know, now you've got so many things. You could, you know, catch a case if you like approach the child, or even deal with the parents. I'll be honest with you, full transparency, I'm not exactly sure how you would deal with that, you know, with your child here today.
Yeah.
You know, social media is huge, and even to this day, my daughter just says, I'm gonna unplug because it's too much. It's like re-traumatizing a person every time they see something that negatively or adversely affects them.
Right. And sometimes that's like the healthiest thing to do. Right. Yeah, our kids have a lot of things they're struggling with in this day and age. And I think kind of normalizing that too, especially, our kids now have gone through the pandemic. That's affected our kids. It's affected their social skills, their peer groups. Yeah, Joellen, you look like you're ready to jump in with.
I didn't want to cut you off.
No, you're good. You're good.
I think an important part for me when I think back to my days on it as a school counselor on a campus was whenever I was working with a student who was struggling in a bully situation, really helping that student to set good boundaries around interactions. And there's a lot that campuses can do to support that process, right? Investigate, we can work the district processes to support the student who's being impacted, et cetera. But for my role as a school counselor, and then even now as a mom of students in schools, right? It's really helping them facilitate their own resilience. So really emphasizing, yes, this sucks, right? There's sometimes no other way to put it. It sucks and it's hard. And it is really challenging for you to come to school right now. And we're going to focus on what we can control. We're going to really look at how we can build your resilience skills. So are we practicing gratitude? Can we find other ways for you to get involved? Let's think outside the box, right? Really get creative with them, because when we have a student and we can help them increase their resilience skills, loneliness goes down, depression goes down, anxiety goes down. So I can't emphasize to those of you listening today, really find some ways to connect with your children and students on how to develop that resilience and perseverance to get through hard things.
I love that, Joellen. One thing that made me think about is also school-based therapists. One thing I think we try to do in schools is help kids build their own support system. Certainly school-based therapists are one person on their team, and, connecting them with their school counselor, making sure they know who that person is and meeting with them, or who's their favorite teacher. Is there a coach? Is there a kid? Even sometimes they pair students with another older student who's a mentor. Or sometimes kids even have a mentor themselves. So I feel like it's also really important to help build young people's support system so that they know they're not isolated. They know they're not alone. There's a whole team of people, including their hopefully parent or caregiver, there for them, as well as their school community, their faith-based community, if there is one, or whatever they're connected to. But helping also, part of that resilience, I think, is also helping them realize all of these people are on my support team. I'm not alone when I'm dealing with these difficult things.
Yeah. What you gonna say? Okay, you're just agreeing? Okay, good. Let's see, so we got about 6 more minutes before questions. So we talk a lot about like how to support kids. What about resources? There obviously integral care, because we see a lot of children and their families. Any other things that y'all can recommend for if there's parents on this forum? Felicia, you have any recommendation? Calling you out there? You did talk about like if someone does need hospitalization, we do have, like Dell Children's, Austin Oaks, that's if they need inpatient, if they're, seriously thinking about harming themselves or others. There are, the hospitals for kids to go to. Any other comments you all would make about any services in the community. Our school-based therapist and. I mean, yeah, we have T-Chat, virtual therapy, yes.
I know 988 is a good resource. You know, we think about what kids can access. A lot of concern tends to happen after school hours when kids are home, sometimes alone. So having, you know, making sure they know what our helpline is or what 988, or I know there are a lot of suicide prevention hotline resources, you know, just making sure kids hopefully have their own toolbox of resources that are accessible when they are, you know, oftentimes in a place of crisis, you know, being alone, or finding themselves having some of this heaviness and maybe needing to reach out to someone. Making sure kids have those accessible or aware of them seems important.
Yes, there's a lot of great, thank you all, the audience is putting stuff in the chat, which is great. And put, you know, the crisis text line, you know, you can TX to 741-741, that's great, because, you know, a lot of times teens don't like to talk per se. They would rather, you know, text, so that's a great one. And, you know, we have Safe Alliance, Parent Support Service. I'm just kind of reading what we get some people here. LifeWorks is great. Yeah, there's private therapists, you know, ACGC, and
I know for my daughter and I, I collected quite a few resources from the Central Texas African American Family Support Conference, which Integral Care hosts usually every year. And I mean, I got some really like great resources. For example, the Hogg Foundation, you know, they have a network. When I was looking for actual clinicians or therapists for my daughter, they have it's called I think it's 4ABHN. It's like the African American Austin Area Behavioral Health Network. And it gives you a list of, or it connects you with people who do counseling in the community. I mean, it really gives you a very culturally well-rounded resource of people who are able to help, who are licensed to help talk to not just your child, but also you. I mean, as a parent, we need support too. Just like Joellen was saying, you know, we go all crazy inside, but we have to keep the calm. I mean, trust me, I was going crazy. I don't know how many times in life, even kind of like now, you know, dealing with my daughter as an adult. I'm just kind of like, what? But I do have to keep the calm. So I have to have a support system as well. And so those resources really through connecting with Integral Care allowed me to get that support, not just for my daughter, but for me as well.
Awesome. And Lady Jane did put the link to the conference, the Central African American Family Support, thank you, conference. And then the one for Hogg is in the chat as well. Yeah, Austin, you know, that's one great thing about Austin. We do have a lot of great resources, you know, in our community. So great. So anything before we start, there's not too many Q&A. I see 7. I'll click on that in a minute. I'm gonna move it over. Before we go to this, panelists, any
One thing I was going to say, Felicia, that I love, you mentioned, is getting support for ourselves. I feel like, you know, many of us as parents that are doing these phases of their development for the first time. So, you know, I feel like kids bring all kinds of new things every day. And so having support for ourselves, certainly talking to other parents, I have gotten lots of wisdom from other parents, you know, ahead of me who've done, you know this resource or done this support group or have, you know, this book or this article or this thing that they read that was helpful to them. So I think getting support for ourselves as parents, as individuals, as adults, you know, modeling that to kids is important, that they see we can't possibly have all the right answers or all the answers. So, you know, we ourselves are in that searching for support. And I think that's a huge, important point that you made.
awesome. I don't know if y'all can see the Q&A, but so some good questions. So I was just looking about the one about books for middle schoolers, how to handle I cannot remember the name. I was going to try to Google it quick, but there's one about middle school and how to just deal with, like, I always call it the middle school drama. But that person says, if you have a, you want to know, put in your email and we can send you it, because I can't remember if somebody else can find it while we're talking, but it has to do with, middle schoolers. There's another great book. I supervise LPCs. They're always like, Melody, you have a book for everything. I'm like, I know, I like books. But one of them I was thinking too, for just dealing with teenagers in general, it's great. It's called I Hate You, Get Out of My Life, but Please Take Me to the Mall First. That is the title of the book. It's great because it talks about, why teens argue. They argue because they want you to change your mind and they want their way, but it's a great book. So if you're a parent of a teenager, I would recommend reading it. Let's see.
Melody, were you trying to think of the Queen Bees and Wannabes by Rosalind Wiseman? For the just middle school drama and kind of little
that
bubbly.
sounds pretty good too.
Okay.
It had middle
Well,
school.
that's a really great one for middle
Yeah.
school challenges.
Yeah, it
with
had middle
friendships
school like
and
in the
stuff.
title of it.
Okay.
But I wrote it down somewhere, now I can't find it. And let's see. I like this question. When we say permanent solution to a temporary problem, how can we?
I'm sure I understand.
Oh, sorry, my watch was listening. Sorry. When we say we have a permanent solution to a temporary problem, how can we communicate that in a trauma-informed way when students are experiencing this due to chronic trauma or complex PTSD? I have students, as a school counselor, who just can't see things ever getting better when it hasn't for them for so long. That's a great question, because we do have a lot of kids, especially that, I was just explaining to one teenager the other day about, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and how it affects, people. Any words from the therapist on the panel?
Yeah.
Or not, Felicia, or?
Well, I mean, I'm not a therapist,
But
right?
you're doing.
But I was saying
Experience.
definitely, yeah, professionally, they definitely would be probably the best ones to answer. I know one thing that helped my daughter was just knowing that she wasn't alone, that I was there with her every step of the way. Sometimes there's a comfort in that, because the hopeless feelings is when you feel alone and
Right.
like you're the only one going through it, and that there's no one there to help you or even listen to you. So that helped her a lot.
Yeah, and it's, I have a private practice, and, when I get kids like this, I tell them, look, especially if they're in counseling, you want to get them in counseling, and, saying, part of the reason why you're here is kind of work through this trauma. And the more we talk about it and, you learn how to work through this, then you'll see your life, well, hopefully, I never say it will hopefully, improve. And I also always tell them, especially if they're in high school, you're in high school, once you get out of high school, that's when you really find out like who you are and what you want to do and who you want to be. And it's more of a freeing experience, I tell them. Then, because sometimes when kids are in high school or middle school, they feel tortured because they're forced to go. Right. So I'm like, let's get you through this time period. And, you have so much left, to live for than just this moment.
Yeah. Well, I also think thinking about therapy, or like some of the moments that, we sit with young people around, whether it's your own kids or kids in a therapeutic setting or in counseling or in schools, all the places, is sometimes just getting through that moment, like allowing, what is it that we need to do to just allow that moment to pass, knowing that there is one, shortly behind it. And sometimes, that really is skills based, because I think a lot of what we teach kids isn't necessarily going to take away the hurt that they had. I mean, what their experiences are huge and valid. And how do we introduce skills to help survive those moments, if that makes sense? It doesn't necessarily soften what they're going through, but but it's allowing for some tolerance, if you will, around like how to get through this moment and find the next one. So I think a lot of the work we do honestly with kids is skills-based, is teaching them, how, whether it's gratitude or breathing or drawing or music, just finding some of those things that help them get through these very difficult moments, because those moments are very challenging. I think I also personally like to teach a lot about what's within their locus of control, because I think one thing we learned in the COVID times is there was so much, and in a lot of ways still is, in our world that reinforced our lack of control. I mean, there was a lot, and that kids learned the fear was real, right? There were a lot of very scary things that went on and still do that are outside of their control. And I think what we see in social media certainly reinforces that. And so in their world and within their locus of control, what are the things they can control, whether it's connecting to someone, that's a positive person in their life, reaching out to that one person that's helpful, that you enjoy in your day, or is it, playing that music that sort of helps you that moment pass, finding what's in their locus of control, because there are a lot of things I feel like floating around that remind us like, oh my gosh, the world is so filled with huge, scary things that are outside of our control. But in their experience, is it like, today I'm going to sit with that friend at lunch, or today I'm going to go talk to that teacher that I enjoy, or is it, I'm going to do this activity that brings me some joy, I'm going to journal. So helping them find what are the things in their experience that they can control, that bring them connection, that, reduce their isolation, that help that moment pass and another one come behind it.
Yeah.
I'd like to add to, I had to do it a lot of trial and error. And the thing that helped my daughter, for some reason, I just told her, I said, you know what I admire about you? In other words, I started sharing what I liked about her. And I said, you never give up. You never give up. Do you know, to this day, my daughter will be 27 next month. And to this day, that still sticks with her. I'm like, man, you never give up. And maybe like I said, I'm not a professional counselor or anything like that, but maybe that might be one way to deal with a trauma type of situation. Say, wow, you never give up, you keep going, or to share things that you like about that or that child or adolescent or young adult. And the second thing I will say, the thing that helped me a lot, we were talking about resources. Travis County underage drinking program, they used to host these like speaker series at libraries throughout Austin. And they had one time this gentleman, he is local, he's in Austin, or he was in Austin. And his name is Dr. Carl Pickard. And Surviving Your Child's Adolescent, let me tell you, that book made me feel normal. I felt totally out of whack as a parent, and it nailed every issue that I was having with my daughter. It just soothed me.
Yeah.
So,
That's a good one. Yeah. Surviving Your Child's Adolescent. That's right. And what was his name again, Felicia?
Dr. Carl, C-A-R-L, and Pickard, P-I-C-K-H-A-R-D-T.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read that one a long time ago.
He has multiple books, but that one, it knocks it out for you right away.
Good. That's a great book, but I also like what you said about telling your child what you like about them. It's fascinating. Like I'll get a kid in therapy and you ask them, well, what's good about you? And they're like, kind of like, oh my gosh. And I look at the parent, I'm like, give me some things. The parent can go boop, 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 boop. And the kid's like, it's like so a lot of times they never heard that their parent thought that about them. So I like that, because we all need a little boost in our self-esteem every once in a while, right? So what a great way is just, just letting our kids know that, we love them, we love their whatever talents they have, the tenacity, you never give up, that's good for kids to hear, because they don't always hear what's, a lot of times parents, I remember I went to a training a long time ago, and like, kid gets all these A's and like one F. What do the parents focus on? The one F, right? Well, maybe they just don't like English, right? But they did all these other A's, so focus on the positive, you know, not the negative. So that's a good reminder. We just got a couple more minutes. I did see the one question. How can I seek therapy if you do not have insurance? So integral care, we do sliding scale, 0 to whatever. So you do not have insurance to seek counseling with us. You can just call the 472 help and schedule an intake for therapy for your child. We also have therapists in schools in
Del Valle, Manor, and Pflugerville ISDs. Yeah, and I think, you know, it's good also, there's certainly a language in looking for therapy. You know, it's a tricky thing, finding a connection, you know, finding someone that you vibe with. Certainly reaching out to several people can be helpful if you're reaching out to the private world, and know that there are a lot of group practices and private practices that also offer sliding scale. So, you know, there's some folks out there doing good work and do offer, you know, discounts or sliding scales as well. One thing I wanted to say to you, Miss Felicia, is don't discount your wisdom. I know you were saying I'm not a therapist, but yet you've done so much work and you have so much wisdom. You know, I love that, and that, you know, it shows. So I wouldn't discount that.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I just want to make it clear. Yeah. There is a question, Melody, that it didn't look like it got into the Q&A, but it's in the chat. And it says, how do I respond, when my 12-year-old son with oppositional defiant disorder texts me, I wish I was dead on a rough day at school, but then shortly texts after that, I don't mean that. So I don't think I can answer that at all.
No, it's a great question.
Yeah.
You know, I think it just goes to what we've all been saying. I'm the moderator. I keep talking. Joellen, you want to jump?
Michelle, I can take this one, or if you
Go
want
ahead,
to.
go ahead.
Okay. I'm not laughing at the question. I'm just laughing at our antics. Sorry, y'all. No, that's certainly first of all, to the person who put that in the chat, I need you to know that's a really, really common phrase that a lot of our students use. And it has been since I've been in education. Unfortunately, I don't like it, but it is our reality. So number one, I would say establish safety of great that he told you, I don't mean that. I would still, if it was my son, I would be going back to say, are you sure? How are you feeling right now? To kind of get a pulse point of how is that student feeling right now versus when they initially texted that I don't want to be here anymore. And then follow that up with what Michelle was talking earlier. It's so important that our children and students know who they can go to, because we're not always going to be there. Yes, we might be a text away, but we can't be there physically in school with them. So who can they go to? Make sure that they know their resources in school, whether that's a couple of trusted adults, some close friends. And then as soon as you have him back at home or after school, say, hey, I want to check back in with you about that. You know, these words have a lot of weight to them, depending, I think he said 11 or 12. As long as they are, you know, cognitively normally developing, they can understand that those words have weight and they mean something different to us as adults when we hear that. And even though he follows it up with, I don't mean that, it still raises an alarm, right? So instead, let's identify what you're feeling. So it feels like you don't want to be here. That's the umbrella, right? That just tells us it's raining and there's stuff going on. But what's underneath that? Are you feeling lonely? Are you feeling angry? Help them identify some feeling words, because Dan Siegel, right? When we name it, we can tame it. And so modeling that again for the children and students we have in our life. I echo what Melody said. It kind of is hard sometimes being the child of a therapist, where we hear a lot in our house of I'm feeling blank, so I need a minute, right? But the more that our students can hear that from the adults in their life, then it normalizes and it starts to change their language from I don't want to be here anymore to I just got cut from the soccer team and my feelings are hurt because I'm disappointed, right? So helping them really change their language and their paradigm shift from this is just my quick response, but this is when I can pause, breathe, and identify a feeling and then communicate that to somebody who cares. and I'm watching our time, Melody, so I'm gonna end it
Yeah,
there.
no, that was all great feedback, yeah. So yeah, we only have like a minute left. This has been awesome. I do want to just please check out the chat because there's other great resources. Somebody mentioned the Christie Center, love them. They have a bunch of different groups, both in person and virtual. The Travis County Underage Drinking Prevention Task Force, they meet don't you all meet monthly or not? Because I get on that email for that, but they're gonna have a speaker November 17th, vaping. We didn't get to talking about that, but that's another big thing with kids nowadays. Yes, please check out that. Let me see. Okay.
And really follow up with these cards. I wish I had these cards when my daughter was coming along. They are perfect. I mean, great
Yeah.
questions.
Here's some other ones you can get. I mean, I love those too. I have like these little table topics too, that I think we talked about too, which are great. So that is our time. So if you have any, if you did not get your question answered, please put your email and one of us will get back with you. I want to thank you all, the panelists. You guys have been great. I want to thank you for your time and your insight. Thanks to everyone who joined us today. When the forum ends, you'll be prompted to take a short survey. We'll just hope you take a few minutes to share your opinion. And again, this was wonderful. Hopefully we'll be doing it again soon. Just want to thank everybody for joining us. All right. Have a great rest of your week. Appreciate it.
Everybody.